Yeah. Yeah. It's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey. Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize every angle's what we really do. We the source. We the pulse of the city too. Landlocked. Got the game in the headlock.
Welcome to the Locker Room, the number one source for Texans daily digital content. I'm Landry Locker. You can hear me Monday through Friday, 10 to 2 on Sports Radio 610 and the Odyssey app. Subscribe right along. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Talked about CJ Stroud last week. We're going to continue the content as we are amidst the downtime, the quote downtime. Players are on vacation. Coaches are on vacation. Camp doesn't start for a while. By the way, we'll be live at training camp. So follow along here. We're going to have the exclusive interviews with the coaches, etc. And we'll keep this daily content going. I want to talk today about the offense, though. And there have been some interesting things said about the Texans offense. And hopes are high, vibes are high because of the quarterback position. Some people feel that they have a long-term answer at quarterback. I think that's to be determined. Who knows what CJ Stroud's going to look like in the long term? Who knows what he's going to look like in the short term? And who knows how the stuff around CJ Stroud is going to look? The wide receivers, there's a lot of questions there. There's reason for optimism at the running back position, but there's also reason for not necessarily concern, but there's reason to wonder how effective this team's going to run the rock. There's also uncertainty at the offensive coordinator spot. And we'll hear from Bobby Slowik in this video, the new offensive coordinator for the Houston Texans. What is Bobby's world going to be like? What is Bobby's world going to be like? We've seen really unimaginative offense from the Houston Texans since Gary Kubiak left. And I think John McClain said they haven't been in the top 10 in scoring or yards since Gary Kubiak left. You had Bill O'Brien and his missionary approach. You had Tim Kelly, who was kind of his clone, and his missionary approach. You had Pep Hamilton. The question of last offseason was, what the hell is a Pep Hamilton offense? We found out it was an offense that sucked and was worse than previous. So Bobby Slowik is going to be kind of the wild card here. And he does come from the same position that Mike McDaniel had before he went to the Miami Dolphins. And he does come as an understudy of the Shanahan-McVay type of pipeline, which has a lot of examples of a lot of success and some immediate success at the NFL level. The question's going to be, though, does he have the weapons to succeed like Mike McDaniel did in Miami? Does he have what Kevin O'Connell had in Minnesota? Spoiler alert, the answer is no. So I think you got to kind of channel the expectations for what you expect from Bobby Slowik and make it proportional. He doesn't have Justin Jefferson, who's the best wide receiver in the NFL. He might not even have Dalvin Cook with Dameon Pierce. He doesn't have Jalen Waddle and Tyreek Hill like Mike McDaniel does. He might not even have Tua. So if the Texans can have somewhat, and I know I mentioned the Giants in the video last week, if the Texans can have a situation where they go from maybe bottom of the league in offense to middle, I think that's going to be a good measurement for Bobby Slowik. But working with a rookie quarterback, working with the wide receivers and the uncertainty that we have there, I don't know what the expectations are going to be, but I think if you do have unrealistic expectations, first of all, I'm not going to tell you to fan. You can think whatever you think, but I do think there's something that has been happening when we talk about the Texans, we talk about the offense, and we talk about, the San Francisco impact that I think it's impossible and is quite frankly unrealistic and unfair to the players to do. And that's the San Francisco dot connecting. When the Texans, when we talk about the tight ends, we talk about George Kittle in San Francisco. When you talk about, how you're going to use certain guys, you hear about Deebo Samuel. I've heard the question's been asked often on here, and subscribe, like, right along. Who's going to be the Deebo Samuel fullback position? They bring in even a guy like Andrew Beck, who's going to be the Kyle Juszczyk The Texans don't have a George Kittle. They don't have a Kyle Juszczyk. They don't have a Deebo Samuel, and they damn sure don't have a Christian McCaffrey. So the first step there is it's not necessarily about how those guys are. It's about how they were used. And Bobby Slowik's going to have to do it with probably less talent. Like Kyle Shanahan used Deebo Samuel as a running back and wide receiver. He used Kyle Juszczyk as a receiver, and he ran the ball with him. He uses George Kittle in the blocking game and as a tight end, which might be the more traditional thing if you could find a George Kittle. Texans don't have a George Kittle at this moment. So there's not going to be an instance where you say, okay, this guy is the Deebo Samuel of the offense, so this guy's a Kyle Juszczyk. It's really just going to come down to how Bobby Slowik uses these guys. And we'll hear from DeMeco Ryans in a minute, but let's hear from Bobby Slowik first, the offensive coordinator for the Texans. And the one thing about offensive-minded coaches, and I've been accused of maybe putting a lot into press conferences. That's why I call myself the podium critic. I've always liked listening to coaches speak. I like hearing players speak. I like hearing what they have to say. And a lot of times when we talk about offensive guys, when they go up to the podium, very rarely do you say, man, this guy's boring, or this guy doesn't seem like he knows what the hell he's doing. Whether it's a Sean McVay, whether it's a Kyle Shanahan, whether it's a Mike McDaniel, whether it's Bill Walsh back in the day, even Kyle Shanahan, like when these guys go up to the podium, you immediately can tell, man, this guy's a smart dude. This is a guy that I want, connecting the dots and calling my offense. And that's kind of the first test I put Bobby Slowik to. And I'll let you partake in this as well. Let's try to listen to Bobby Slowik, one of his media availabilities, and let's try to see if we can at least imagine that Bobby Slowik, while he might not have the same caliber of talent, if you can envision this guy overseeing an offense and knowing what the hell he's doing. Here's Texans offensive coordinator Bobby Slowik, starting by talking about just the philosophy of this offense and what he brings to the table.
Philosophy, like everything we do, really as a football team, starts from minutia and grows up into an offensive side of the ball, and then from there into a team. And there's a lot of fundamentals and techniques that go along with that at every position. So quarterback, receiver, back, all the way across the offense. And they've all really came in and attacked it as a group, which is probably one of the coolest things to see with CJ is it's not just him alone. They're all doing it together. And he's been awesome. He's been putting the work in. They've all been coming in for some extra work and doing stuff on their own when they're away from here. They've been doing great.
Teaching CJ the offense, you've been building it first. What came first? Did you have an idea of what you wanted to go with him with? Then
I love questions like this. How are you going to teach CJ?
Yeah, I think every player you have before you're really empowered to teach or coach them. I think you have to have a vision for what they're going to do and who they are and what's going to make them the best they can be. So you kind of start there and then you branch off into, okay, we need to attack this. This is your strength. Let's make sure we emphasize this. We struggle a little at this aspect. Let's try to work on this to get that improved so that the totality of what we do then fits into what the guys around us are doing, which then fits into the offense. So it's kind of been the same for everybody in that regard, CJ included.
The majority of the people you on staff in San Francisco, all up the head coach now. The majority of them ended up dealing with a quarterback, first round quarterback, actually, a little corner or not. And obviously, I'm guessing you still talk to some of those guys in San Fran and on staff. What have you learned from the Flores, the Michael Flores, the Salas, the Mike Daniels that you can apply now to teaching CJ how to be a quarterback in the system?
Yeah, I've been fortunate in that, like you said, I have a lot of connections and people that I'm friends with that I know across the NFL that have been through this process. And I've also been fortunate that I went through it really the last 2 years with Trey and with Brock in a different way. And just getting like the different ways and the different styles guys play, guys learn, they put things together, and the process they have to go through to like get to where you envision them getting to, and the patience that's required when you do that, while at the same time like the urgency that's required when you do that. It's always a balancing act, and being able to bounce ideas off guys.
I really like that. We're listening to Bobby Slowik here here in the locker room. The balance between patience and urgency. I think that's very, very well said. And I do like the experience, the coming from Shanahan, you automatically talk Shanahan tree. I said that at the start of this, but when you talk about dealing with Trey Lance and dealing with Jimmy Garoppolo and dealing with Brock Purdy last year, I like the way that he talks about balance of urgency and patience.
Or have guys tell you their experiences and what they went through and what to watch out for, which may or may not apply to the situation you're going through. But it's always beneficial when you have people around you that, have been through it.
Earlier in this process, what did you learn from Tank? What you learned about, Tank Dale and Xavier Hutchinson?
Yeah, again, it's going to sound like a broken record, but the first thing that jumps off about all these guys is just they come in and they're hungry and they come in ready to work. And Tank comes from a very different offense at Houston, very, very productive, efficient, but it's just a different style to what we're really doing here. So there's a bit of a learning curve. And I mean, when he's out on the field, he doesn't blink. I don't think anyone's noticed how big of a leap it is because he's been on it and he's been working. Same thing. He's taking what we're telling him as far as coaching, as far as what we see in the fundamentals of route running. I mean, he's a pretty natural separator, but to also apply that, okay, well, how's this fit within the offense? When I know the quarterback has to look at me at this time, and there's a lot that goes into that for him. And I mean, it's been hitting the ground running for him. I mean, it's been not an issue.
We haven't heard anything bad about Tank, have we?
Stroud had in Ohio State to hear, and everybody's had their story about how he's reached out to learn more. I'm sure you have those too. What have you seen?
Yeah, it's required that he reaches out to learn more from me. But so that's happened a lot.
That's what's up right there.
But he wants to have command of what's going on, as anyone who's in that position should. They want to feel comfortable in what they're doing, what direction they have to go, what answers they have to have on every play. And every play is a little different. And, for him being able to tie things back to other experiences that are the same is kind of what we grind through over and over again. And it's really a lot of, again, our offense and our defense as we do the minutia branch out from it. And then at the end of the day, we kind of point back to things we've already talked about and said, hey, this is the same as something else you've already done, and that just helps them hone in on specifics.
Fans are familiar with the Gary Kubiak offense,
and probably the edges have branched off maybe a hair. Like, I mean, the league has just changed. There's some different defenses you see. There's some different issues you get. So you find different ways to adjust to that. But it's cool because it ties back to the previous question. You just point to something else that they did back then and be like, hey, this is the same as that was, but now we're doing it this way. So that was really neat when I first got to throw on some Houston Texan film and see all of them play.
still in setting example standpoint, what did you see from Dalton Schultz and what's the vision for Dalton?
Yeah, he's just a professional. All the vets we've kind of brought in have really helped a lot in bringing their position group along and kind of, bringing the young guys with them, showing what it's like to work, to be a professional as far as what you got to do every day, mentally, physically on the field, how you work, how you go about your business. And he's been awesome in that regard. And then, you see a guy who knows how to run routes. He's got a big frame. He knows how to catch. He's fully invested in the run game. So he's been doing a great job.
Coach, it wouldn't be fair to coach.
All right, so that's some interesting stuff from Bobby Slowik. He talked about Dalton Schultz. The key words there, though, that I want to focus on are adjust and strengths and weaknesses, because I think that's what the good offensive coaches do, right? Like Kyle Shanahan, if he has RG3, the offense is going to look different than if he has Matt Ryan. And it's going to look different if he has Trey Lance than if he has Jimmy Garoppolo or Brock Purdy. Adjustments. You don't try to fit the square peg into the round hole. As some people will say, and that's really where we're going to judge Bobby Slowik. And the beauty is, and where you get nervous too, is we don't know. I mean, you've seen guys that have learned from the best, and they're unable to put it to practice. And it's going to be the first time that Bobby Slowik has the play sheet in front of him. And it's one thing to be sitting there with Kyle Shanahan and being a resource and speaking when spoken to and providing input whenever you see fit. But when you're the head honcho, it's going to be different. And there might be an adjustment period. He does seem, though, and I think you might agree with this, he does seem to sound like, or at least resemble, someone who could be a very, very smart offensive mind. And he's got the experience to do it. He's got a unique path. So we'll see what happens there. The strengths of this offense, it is the locker room. Subscribe, like, appreciate everyone for rolling along. The strength of this offense needs to be the offensive line. It has to be. You have the most invested in it. You have the highest paid offensive lineman in the NFL in Laramie Tunsil, all pro caliber ball player. You have Titus Howard at right tackle. You should feel good about him. I know he's looking for a big payday. You traded for Shaq Mason. You made Shaq Mason one of the 11 highest paid guards based on per year value. You traded up for Juice Scruggs. You already have DeMeco Ryans talking about Juice Scruggs looking like a veteran. Center was a huge position of need. And you drafted Kenyon Green in the first round last year. We don't know what Kenyon Green's going to be. And whether it's Kenyon Green or not, the offensive line needs to be a strength. And I think it's realistic to think that this can be a good offensive line. Tight ends, I think you should feel good about too. You have one of the best receiving tight ends in the league the last few years in Dalton Schultz. You have Tegan Quinteriano, and then you got a lot of guys that you can do a lot of things with behind them. It's an intriguing position. Brevin Jordan, not sure if he's going to be in the mix or not. But you have a lot of potential talent at tight end. Running back, you should feel good. You're going to need to at least find someone who can kind of ease the burden from Dameon Pierce. You think Devin Singletary can be that guy? And then you have some other guys, some young guys behind them, Zaladay and some others that hopefully you can have multiple running backs. And I think that's going to be important, running back depth. You address that. The wide receiver position, though. The wide receiver position is very uncertain. And I don't think anyone thinks that the Texans have like a future number one receiver, although we hear a lot of good stuff about Tank Dell. Have some veterans in Robert Woods, some young guys with uncertainty like Nico Collins. But I don't think too many people expect too much from the wide receiver position, except head coach DeMeco Ryans, who was on Sports Radio 610 last week with The Drive with Clint Sterner and Ron Hughley. And he thinks that the wide receiving group is going to surprise some people. And this was a response to a question from Clint Sterner, in which Clint Sterner confessed what many of us have said, and that he has low hopes for the wide receiver group. Here's what the head coach of your Houston Texans, DeMeco Ryans, had to say about that.
Yeah, those guys have done a really good job of what we're doing, right? What we're asking them to do offensively. And, you know, I'm not concerned with where we are with our wide receivers. I like our group. I like where we are. I feel like we have a lot of talented guys, have a lot of different qualities, right? You talk about Nico Collins. You got the big guy with the best, probably the best hands on the team. You got the veteran Robert Woods, just been consistent, day in, day out, pro. Tank Dell comes in, provide his route running ability. He's been open a lot in OTA, so that's exciting. And Mechie, right, we're expecting Mechie to be back for training camp. And I'm just excited to see him out there. I know the type of player he was, seen him in college, seen the type of playmaking ability that he has. So I'm excited just to see his growth, right, when he's, you know, added to that offensive group there. So we have a lot of, and then some of our young guys, you know, are stepping up, making plays as well. So I think our wide receiver group will probably surprise a lot of people.
My question is this, and I want you to comment as well. What does a surprise from the wide receiver group look like? If the expectations are low, what does a surprise from the wide receiver group look like? Because let's just go back to last year's stats, and I'll pull those up right here. Last year, the wide receiving group was one of the worst in the league, and Brandon Cooks was one of the biggest disappointments in all of football. He was playing bad from the jump, and then he started pouting because his buddy Jack Easterby left, and he became even more pitiful than he'd been all season long. What does a surprise look like? Let's just pull up these numbers last year from the wide receiver group. Last year, your leader in receptions was Brandon Cooks with 57 catches. The next most was Chris Moore with 48. So you had just two wide receivers with over 40 catches in Chris Moore and Brandon Cooks, and the yards were 548 and 699. That's bad. The year before, the 2021 regular season, Brandon Cooks had a decent year. He had a hell of a lot of targets, but Brandon Cooks had 90 catches, and your next most at wide receiver was 33. So you only had one guy with 40 catches or more, and that was Brandon Cooks. After that, the next most was Nico Collins at 33. So when we look at wide receivers, we often find ourselves saying, well, you know, if you don't have a number one wide receiver, then you're concerned about the wide receiving group. And I don't disagree with that. But for me, what a surprise would look like for me, where you had two guys with 40 catches last year and you had one the year before. I think a little bit of balance. If you can get to where you have three guys with 40 catches, and you can even make it Dalton Schultz, but we're talking about the wide receivers right now. But if you have Robert Woods with 40 catches, Nico Collins with 40 catches, and then someone else with 40 catches, to me, that's a pleasant surprise. That's a low expectation, and that's a low bar. And I think that would be a pleasant surprise for me. Three guys with 40 catches. Dalton Schultz might even lead you in receiving, but that's what it needs. The ball needs to be spread out. The target share needs to be equal. It'd be nice to see Nico Collins healthy. It'd be nice to see how Tank Dell fits into this offense. But if you ask me what a surprise looks like, what a pleasant surprise looks like, I don't expect any of these guys to be number one guys, but three guys with 40 catches. How about that? Maybe I'm setting the bar too low. Let me know. Subscribe, like, right along. A lot of questions about the offense. The biggest question is going to be Bobby Slowik. There's reason for optimism there. Wide receiver position, DeMeco Ryans feels good about it. My question is, like, what would surprise? Appreciate everyone for coming through. No matter what happens, whether the wide receiver surprise or not, when it comes to this Texans game and it comes to this Texans content, we are all in this together. Appreciate everyone for coming through. They say it's the downtime, not around here. Content still coming. Appreciate you.
Texas talk, yeah, you know what we about to do. Localize, every angle's what we really do. We the source, we the pulse of the city too. Landlocked, got the game in the headlock. Localize every time, can't stop, won't stop. Yeah, we top two and we not too. Plugged in daily digital.